as a man, you've got to show them that you're not perfect. And when you have to come down on them, if you end up having to discipline a child, and maybe you did out of anger and frustration, right? And you didn't actually discipline them in the right way. You've heard the phrase before, discipline without love can be considered abuse. So being able to follow up and say, I'm sorry, I love you. Do you understand why I was upset? And really helping that child to develop their own process. These are some of the things that I took from other men in my life who were raising their kids as well.
You're listening to the Building Men Podcast with Dennis and Anthony Miralda, brothers on a mission
to help you become the strongest version of yourself, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically.
What's up, brother? Hey, friend, huh? Look at that. I'm interested to see your take on this. We are in this studio today. The setup is a little bit different. We actually had a photographer come into the studio today and take pictures and videos of us for our big event, the Hero's Journey, that's coming up at the end of April, beginning of May. So what's your initial take on that process that we just went through?
What, getting pictures?
Yeah.
Well, I'm a former model, so that was pretty easy for me to get right into character there.
To the new listeners of Building Men, talk to us really quickly about that modeling experience, if you wouldn't mind.
I got asked to be a model for a wedding magazine, or it was like a blog or something that they were doing. I didn't know what the hell I was walking into, and the only thing that they said, they needed someone who was over 6'2" with blue eyes, and they needed to be able to put their hair into a man bun. And I'm like, all right, I guess I'm growing my hair out. And it was like $100 or something. I was like, I don't care. You can pay me nothing. I want to take pictures of me. Cool. And it ended up being on an alpaca farm. And part of it was I had to learn how to walk and deal with alpacas, which I didn't even know they were a thing in New Jersey until we found the one alpaca farm that was there. And yeah, it was great. I got to wear suspenders and hold an alpaca and get married to a girl that I met 2 minutes before.
And didn't you go on a date or two?
Yeah,
she was good looking.
She was. Yeah. She was a good time.
so this was your second experience in a photo shoot, and we had let's give a plug to Erin Finlayson in the studio, who took pictures of us for this Hero's Journey retreat that we're going on. We needed some still shots, and it was just awkward. She's like, okay, look natural when you're talking to each other. And that's all we do is talk to one another. But once we were told that we needed to talk to one another, then it became this awkward experience.
I was trying to figure out how my face looked. Do I smile now? Where do I look when I'm doing this? I wasn't listening to a word you said either. I was just like, should I nod? I should nod now.
Yeah, nod, pretend like, and I put my hat on. My hair was so jacked up. I lost a bet to my son, and my daughter shaved a mohawk into my hair in a really precarious way. It was all jacked up, and so my hair is almost bald right now. And doing this photo shoot, it was a rough one for me. So I grew the beard out longer, so this way you didn't look at the head as much.
Your hair didn't look. You're acting like it looks that like ridiculous, but it really does. I mean, compared to my cut,
right? Compared to your hair, right?
Yeah. So I get it. I get why you feel insecure about that.
Yeah, it was. I've more the alpaca head looking thing going.
Exactly. That's why I'm so comfortable next to you right
now. I love you, brother. All right, so we're gonna bring on our guest right now, and before we bring him on, our guest AJ Donaldson. I met AJ in September timeframe through Mark Wiener and Mikey Fallon, the Map Project. It was this connection that we had. They were doing a big event for the Epic Foundation in Bimini in the Bahamas, and it was a crazy experience just to be able to go down there to interview AJ. So this will be take 3 with our interview. I interviewed AJ live on stage in Bimini, which was such a cool event. And since then, he and I have gotten close. We've gotten to know each other over the past few months. And so now this is the first time he's actually, quote unquote, officially on the podcast. But I feel like the audience knows him already, even though they don't, even though this will be the first time that they're meeting him. He also was a part of the Pillars of Masculinity event, where he talked about giving back, doing something to give back. So if you watch that event, or if you saw it on YouTube, you will know AJ Donaldson, the founder of the Epic Foundation, experienced professionals impacting communities, former fullback on Miami Hurricanes, number 49, close friend of mine. Welcome to the show, AJ Donaldson.
What's up, fellas? How you doing?
Good, my man. Good, my man. So yeah, it's good to see. I'm glad you're here. I'm really glad we were able to make this work. I felt bad. I introduced you to several other guys. You were introduced to Angelo Cisco and Austin Linney and Ian Lobos, guys that we have had on the podcast ourselves, been on their podcast. Yet we jacked up the audio the first time so we haven't had you on. So I feel bad. I'm glad you're here today.
Listen, man, we've had so many shared experiences together, bro. Like, you are another brother of mine, and I appreciate you. I see you growing out that mountain man beard of yours there, bro. I see you, man. Like, I miss your face. And I see your formerly known as model brother in the house too, man. Good to see you too, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Good to be with you.
So yeah,
I love the whole alpaca background. That's hilarious.
You can look it up. If you type my name on Google, you can see me with an alpaca. It's actually a good time.
And then you have to pay extra money to see the other shit.
The other ones,
alpacas.
right. Yeah,
that's illegal in many states.
Right,
the
right.
other stuff.
Still making money.
Explicit footage. Yeah.
So AJ, for the sake of the Billy Men audience, I would love to take you for you to walk us back through your origin story. Growing up, you grew up in a single parent family, the way that your mom was raising you. It's such an interesting story. And for the sake of the Billy Men audience, I'd love for you to share how you went from your origin up through, take us through high school into college when you're playing football for the U.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I appreciate that very much. It means a lot to me to be able to even share and going way, way back, not to date myself, but, growing up here in sunny South Florida, though today is not so sunny South Florida, it looks like Seattle weather today. But I grew up down here in a low income population called Opelika. So for those people who are familiar with South Florida, you will know very well that the Opelika area tends to be more low, semi-moderate income homes. There used to be commercials back in the day, how close Opelika and Hialeah is. There was these flea market, swap shop commercials, Opelika, Hialeah. So just a lot of synergy when it comes to the Black American community and the Hispanic community down here. Hialeah, a lot of people will joke about, no matter if a hurricane blows through South Florida and turns all the lights off, Hialeah will always have its electricity, right? Opelika is the same way. If we got to run all of our car batteries in series, we gonna have lights. So resourceful is just something that has always been there. I am a Jamaican American, so I am born and raised here in South Florida, but by way of Jamaica, my mother, a hardcore, very disciplined Jamaican woman who came out of Jamaica, came here to the States, met the gentleman who ended up fathering me in that respect. Unfortunately, that relationship did not work out. And she made a very conscious decision that she didn't want him to be a part of the raising, and as well as he most likely didn't want to be a part of having to assume those responsibilities as a father. So she decided, I'm gonna do it on my own. I don't need you. And to this day, I respect her for making that decision, for taking that on herself. And all the things that she did to sacrifice for me, some of the surprising notions now. I've got my own sons, right? Not to fast forward, I'll go back. I got my own sons and I'll take them down to Opelika, to the home that I was raised in, and come to find out that she bought it for $50,000 back in 1985, $50,000 for a home. So that, just to kind of think about what a house like that would look like, but she made it home, right? She made it beautiful. She made sure that I was constantly doing chores and keeping it clean. Once again, another discipline. The word and the phrase and the concept of discipline is very key to my upbringing. Things like I said, chores and making sure that I was always upkeeping my grades. She didn't play that. You came home with a B, it was hell to pay. We won't even talk about C's, D's, and F's. That didn't exist in my house. You got a B, it's like you failed, and you were going to have, hell to pay when you got home. So you can imagine the type of rigor and discipline in my home. And of course, music. My mother is a musician. She's an opera singer. She is a classical pianist. Hella skilled in that, blows people away, plays throughout South Florida, around the US. She's played in before. So she raised me playing the piano at an early age as well. I say and I share all that because those disciplines is what allowed me to be exposed to different communities, to be exposed to different lifestyles, because coming up in that house, not even realizing that it was technically impoverished or poor, right? Or low income in that aspect. I didn't recognize that. I didn't recognize the loss of a father until much later in my life. because of the fact that the discipline, the love, there was no loss. My mom jokes all the time when Father's Day's come around. She's like, "Where's my card at?" Right? And so she assumes that responsibility. And it wasn't until much later in life where, you start to check girls and you don't want to necessarily bring that home to mom and talk to mom about those things, that I would seek out, advice, or, you kind of lean on your friends in the neighborhood, not necessarily the best advice, right, that you should be taking. So as I got older, I had a chance to go to a private school called Day Christian School. Because of my talents, because of my grades, because of my mom's sacrifice to put me through private school education, that's what exposed me to a completely different lifestyle. Both mom and dad present at home, mom not necessarily having to work, right? Dad actually being available, and then still having the resources to remodel the homes. I was exposed to something else, and it made me want and desire more for myself and for my mother in my house. So having the opportunity to get a scholarship, and though, yeah, I did play ball. I played football at the University of Miami, but that's not my claim to fame. I tell people all the time, I actually earned a full academic scholarship to the U. And there's a very interesting story behind that and how I was recruited technically. And the Canes, right? We just celebrated 20 years to our 2001 championship not too long ago during the season. And the Canes were able to have an athlete who also had a scholarship academically. So they had an opportunity to have their cake and ate it. And there's a lot that I can unpack from that whole situation, but it really is that whole origin story is really a part of what drives me and what I do day to day now through the Epic Foundation.
Right. And it's interesting the way that your mom raised you. She served in both roles, the mother, and she helped you identify your sense of masculinity. What were a couple of the lessons that your mother taught you about being a man? You mentioned the self-discipline, the chores, the being more of a Renaissance man. We talked about that at several points. You didn't identify yourself just as an athlete, as a football player. You were more well-rounded. So what were a couple of the other lessons that your mom had taught you about being a young man growing up?
Well, outside of the biblical principles based in my mother, the home that I was raised in was very Baptist and Christian based, very religious. That whole concept of spare the rod, spoil the child. My mom took that very serious, to say the least. There was no cutting up. It was funny because I had two different personas, right? And there was value in that because when I came home, I had to come correct. I had to be articulate. I had to enunciate and pronunciate my words. I could not have slang. I could not be cursing, right? That's because of the household I came in. But when I went out on the streets and was playing ball with my friends, it was a completely different persona, right? So that balance and that ability to turn it off and on a drop of a dime on behalf of the discipline I had in my home was key. Another principle that really resonates and kind of segues over to the Epic Foundation is that you don't complain about something you're not willing to do something about, right? I don't stand around and bitch and moan about things that I have either no control over or I'm not willing to take action towards making it better. That's another profound principle that came up that, my mother raised me up on. And then, as you alluded to the Renaissance aspect and being more well-rounded, my mom was very adamant about being able to provide for yourself. She was an entrepreneur. She had a music business. So I was exposed to entrepreneurship at an early age. And even she threatened me. She's like, I better not ever see you working at a McDonald's, a Burger King. Again, nothing against those who have worked at McDonald's or Burger King or Publix, great organizations. But she was adamant that all the talents and disciplines, more than anything else, that she developed and that I developed would be able to pay my bills without having to default to a minimum wage job.
The role models that you had then, were there masculine role models that you had, either athletes, people in, celebrities, men in the community? Who were the role models that you had that helped you then identify, taking the lessons that your mom had taught you and saying, okay, this is what it looks like, sounds like, feels like as a man?
It's a great question. So, first and foremost, in my younger years, growing up in my mother's home, she went to church. It was church on Sunday, of course. It was like Bible service on Wednesday. It was youth service on Friday. It was choir practice on all the other days, right? So I grew up in that environment. And some of those pastors or youth pastors, those who had the personalities that resonated with me, I would kind of lean towards seeking that mentorship from them, right? And depending on the individual, I would either seek mentoring from that individual or I would stay away from the mentoring that individual wanted to provide because it didn't fit with what I wanted to build as a character, as the persona, as the personality of who I wanted to be, who I saw myself becoming. I joke about this. We were reading a book the other day where you talk about some of the fictional and non-fictional characters, right? So that would be some of the non-fictional characters. But even some of the fictional characters, I mean, dude, I love Batman. Batman, I thought was one of the coolest, characters ever. When it was Batman versus Superman, Superman got his ass whooped, right? And the reason why, or the biggest part of that, is that Batman used his head, his intelligence, his drive, his passion, his motivation to be an alien that was stronger than anything that was ever known to man. He used his wits. Think about Batman, from the trauma, from the loss of his family, that crisis that befalled him, he took that wealth, stripped himself, if you see some of the movies, stripped himself down to poverty and became a student, a mentee of different masters, right? And that was what I identified with. I wanted to find people that were amazing, that were incredible, that were great at certain things. If it was public speaking, right? If it was being an athlete, right? A football player, a musician, a ladies' man, right? Any of these things that I saw in somebody, I would emulate. I would pay attention. And this is another principle my mom raised me in, and this is an old school Jamaican thing, is the kids are simply seen and not heard, right? That's old school. So it taught me the discipline of shutting my mouth and listening and paying attention. So some of those key elements allowed me to emulate different characteristics from both fictional and non-fictional characters that exist in order to create the man I wanted to be.
Did you find that you were, because you grew up in a household that was, your mother held you to a high standard, it was a kind of strict environment that you were in, as a young kid, did you find yourself being combative, like wanting to go against that all the time, and like finding that, because now you could look back and see all the value in it, but when we're kids, right, and you see somebody else who their parents are just like, they let them do whatever the hell they want, they can stay out late. I see it now why it was important that my parents did that, but before, all I wanted to do was go against it. So at the time, was it kind of like, would you go out and completely go against that, or be somebody completely different and, sort of live in this world where you're sort of like pushing it constantly and seeing, especially being around different people, come from different backgrounds?
Yeah, man, absolutely. No doubt. I mean, it's all a part of our growth process, right? When we go from our adolescence and childhood into, this teenage years and rebelliousness and just kind of, sharpening your teeth and trying to become more gritty and so forth. Of course, there were a lot of those things. Now, out of respect and even a healthy fear that I had in my home, I knew there was a certain way, like I said before, I had to show up when I was in her home. But once I was not in her home, right, it was different. As I transitioned into college, where I thought, beat my chest, I'm a little bit more bigger, stronger, faster, right? At the University of Miami, took great pride in back in the late 90s, early 2000s. It was interesting, the dynamic of wanting to do what I wanted to do because I thought I was already grown, right? But then at the same time, recognizing that I am still a dependent. Like, I can't go out and go buy my own house. But if I'm on campus and I can live on campus, I can show up differently. So, for sure, even the example of my mom sucks at math. I'm an engineer, right? So those gifts, right brain, left brain, some of the skill sets and talents that came out of music, but I'm not a concert pianist. I can play the piano, right? And I did what she told me to do, but it's not something that I wanted to become, right? And then, finding more spiritual approaches to life versus being so hyper religious. I used to joke all the time, my mom, if I sneeze because I'm, cleaning the house and dusting or something like that, my mom rebuked the devil. And I'm like, it's dust, like, calm down. You know what I mean? So being able to process independently on my own, having my own process. But absolutely, there was always that rebellious stage as to, well, what mom doesn't see won't kill her, right? And I'm at the U and I'm drinking and I'm chasing tail and I'm doing all those things. Mom was not about that, but as long as she didn't know, my life was safe. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Before we get to the you and your experience there, I'm wondering the lessons that you took from mom and the other mentors. How many of those lessons are you then translating onto raising your own children?
Oh, dude, that's huge. So the foundation is there. I will always accredit my mom for that, but I recognized, especially when I got married, my wife and I got together we got married about 11 years ago. We were dating probably 6, 7 years. It took me a long time in courting this young lady to finally, pop the question because, she had a child. And I couldn't help myself but gravitating towards trying to help her raise that child. We were all friends, we were in a group, there was a friendship there, there was love there, but I was so adamant about trying to help her raise this young boy because I saw myself. I saw my single mom and I saw me. And I talk about it sometimes when at 13 years old, when my mom remarried and it was a stepfather who we had a horrible relationship with, I remember being 13, 14 years old and imagining myself at 33 years old coming back and kind of saving myself. So, that imagination when I reached my 30s, became a reality where I had an opportunity to kind of help a young man that's being raised by a single mom in her own way. But obviously there's always going to be a deficit because the need of the father figure, the aspect of father, it is absolutely necessary. So now that I'm a man and I am looking to be a father, it really allowed me to take a lot of that foundational stuff, but take it to the next level. And I sought, once again, mentors. I have a gentleman by the name of David Jamion, an amazing individual who raised 3 powerful young men, just doing great things. They always had all the superlatives and all the accolades and all those things coming out of high school. So I remember seeking him out. I'm like, dude, maybe I'm in over my head. I don't know. I've never seen a relationship work before. I've never seen a man and a wife, a husband and a father. I've never seen that work, but now I'm getting ready to venture into a marriage and trying to be a father at the same time. How the hell do you do this, right? And I would seek advice, right? Things like being able to apologize to your son. What? My mother, I've seen my mother cry probably twice in my life, number one, right? And best believe my mom may never apologize for me for a damn thing, right? So to have a man who raised incredible boys, young men, say that as a man, you've got to show them that you're not perfect. And when you have to come down on them, if you end up having to discipline that child, and maybe you did out of anger and frustration, right? And you didn't actually discipline in the right way. You've heard the phrase before, discipline without love can be considered abuse. So being able to follow up and say, I'm sorry, I love you. Do you understand why I was upset? And really helping that child to develop their own process. These are some of the things that I took from other men in my life who were raising their kids as well.
I'm wondering how many times has Dad apologized to you?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if I've ever heard him apologize.
Well, it's funny when you're talking about this because that exact statement that you just made right there is the reason why most men or anybody in general has to go back and revisit their inner child because they never got those words from their parents growing up. They never told them, they never let them have a voice. They never felt heard. And so now it's resonating with them as an adult because no one ever said, I love you and I hear you and I understand you. And so you're sitting there thinking, my voice doesn't matter. I'm not heard. Nobody cares about me.
Absolutely. And AJ, I didn't think we're going to go down this direction, but I want to explore it. Never talked about this on the podcast before, so we'll go down some uncharted territory here. As we're down in Bimini together, I met your wife, Jade. She's an unbelievable human being, a badass athlete herself. And Julie, my girlfriend, was down there, and Julie and Jade hit it off right away. And again, I wasn't thinking I would go down this direction, but being in a relationship with a woman who's divorced herself, who has 2 sons who are 17 and 18 years old, my role, dating her, there's a lot of situations where I'm on the fence whether or not I should step in and offer a piece of advice to them or hang back. I'm not their father, right? We've been dating for 1.5 years now or so, and there are a lot of times where I want to be like, hey, did you ever think about this? Or why not do this? So I'm always in that middle ground of uncertainty whether or not I don't want to overstep. I want to be very respectful, but also there are a lot of opportunities for pieces of advice that I know would benefit each one of them as they're going through this, transition from high school and beyond. So what advice would you give to me is what I'm asking as I'm trying to navigate this situation right now.
Dude, I appreciate that very much. An opportunity, even asking that question, that says a lot about you and your character. And in your position of dating an incredible woman like Julie, I mean, we hit it off. Dating her, really, really hit it off. But I was just in awe of how she shows up and how present she is in her emotions and those around her. It was just incredible to see her navigate through the crowd and the people that were there and even helping us. She had no reason to. There was, she wasn't a part of the committee or a gala committee, anything like that, but she was just so adamant about supporting us in our event and supporting you. And it was just incredible to see you guys interact as well. Julie, shout out to her, just big up to Julie. If I had to be completely transparent, the difference right there, because you said you guys have been dating for about a year and a half and her sons are 17 and 18 years old. As her brother Anthony was just sharing, that rebellious stage, they're right there, right? I would assume they're at that 16, 17, 18. I got this, on top of the fact that mom is now dating this dude, screw him or otherwise. Maybe they, show up respectfully, but what they may be dealing with and trying to process in and of themselves, right? Dating girls and now having to think of their mom as somebody dating. I don't even want to be thinking about that. So I just shut it down and shut you out. They may not be open to that, right? And Anthony articulated it very well. And you've heard this, where the basic human needs to be seen, heard, and understood, right? So being able to have an opportunity to develop a relationship with them individually, independent to Julie, behind scenes, and giving them a voice, allowing them to be heard, almost feeling like you're on their side because you can get what it is to be, the son of a strong and beautiful mother who is desirable to other men and so forth, not approaching it from that standpoint at all, but being able to just see where they're at, like meet them where they are. Where are they right now? Because I may not want any advice from you, dude.
Right.
But, but if you want to go to a Heat game, or for us down here, the Heat game, a basketball game, or something that I think is cool and I want to, ride along and kind of hang out with you, there may be an opportunity to develop a relationship and allow them to feel more comfortable to have a voice, and just being able to shut your mouth and listen, right? And asking more questions from them and getting them to open up more. I think that's the best approach, is really just allowing them to be seen, heard, and understood.
I appreciate that. And it's interesting, the dynamic for the Pillars of Masculinity, the event that we did, a lot of it came from a conversation I had with Julie's son, Liam, in the kitchen right around Thanksgiving with Ben, Dante, Nate, and Colin. And we were shooting the shit around what are their fears right now? What are things that they're worried about? What are things? And they started to talk about the pressures that they're feeling around.
That's amazing.
Around college. Like, everyone's like, where are you going to college? What are you going to major in? They're like, I need to be me. I'm 17, 18 years old right now. There's a lot of shit that we're dealing with. And I said, let's move Building Men in a direction. Let's give some advice to young men right now that are struggling in a specific area. There's a ton of mentors that we have out there that can offer this piece of advice that can help young men that are struggling in one aspect or another of their life, and to know that there are men out there that have gone through the similar things, and a piece of advice that they might give. And so now I'll segue, AJ, into, I don't want to miss the opportunity to dive into your experience at the U, because you played for 3 years. Go ahead. I'm sorry. You wanted to say something there.
Yeah, not to interrupt. I wanted, before we move past the Suns, I think it was incredible that during the holiday season that you were in a group of other men, right? All chilling, all talking, all interacting, where they don't have to hear it from you because you're in a very precarious and very sensitive position with their mother. But these are your friends. This is your circle. These are your groups of people. So they may be articulating some of the same things that you have had a chance to dialogue. Why do I say that? Because a lot of times when we're too close, just like in some of these cop series, and you hear, hey, you're too close to the situation to really know how to judge it, right? So you got to you got to sit the sideline. You can't do nothing, and it sucks because you want to let me in, coach, put me in, coach. I got so much to share. But being able to step back and step out of the way and let some of these other cats, getting them exposed to other men who think and would share very similar to you, that's mentoring. Like, that's such a dynamic impact. That's such a dynamic place to be in, especially during that specific season of that 15 to 22, before they realize, holy crap, what my mom and my dad and what my people were telling me makes sense. And we're all like, and you guys tell me, correct me if I'm wrong, this has happened to you. I think it's happened to most young men, where it gets to that point where you have that epiphany, and that, like, you're calling your mom and dad and you're just like, oh my God, like, thank you for everything you did. Thank you for everything you said. I know I was an asshole, My bad, right? And thank you.
Yep, absolutely. You're talking about the Donnie Brasco, right? Donnie Brasco. It's like you're too close to the situation. You're like, you get too deep into it. AJ, I'd love to hear about your experience at the U, your experience at playing football at a high level at a prestigious Division I school. You mentioned you went there on an academic scholarship, so there's the pride associated with that. Talk to us quickly about your experience at the U. Like, what was a life lesson that you learned playing football there?
Wow. So, and I appreciate you asking that question because there's so much to unpack from that experience there. So everything you've heard about my background, being a 4.0, 1400 SAT score kid out of the hood, when we really think about processes and industries, when we think about business modeling, right? We overlook the fact that the school system, the education system is an industry. And it's something that people do not think about very often. We've over-romanticized the fact that they have a sales funnel, right? There's a whole approach regarding their marketing. So imagine growing up in Opelika, right? South Florida, you see Ray Lewis on the screen every day, knocking people's heads off, right? I got a lot of my own self-fulfillment and therapy even on the football field. By way of Jamaica, being here, soccer, it's the other football we play, right? But I was too rough. I had too much anger that I would pour out on the field. So they were like, you need to play the other football, put a helmet on me, point and shoot, and I'm knocking people out. So emulating a gun, at that point, Ray Lewis was a fictional character because there was no axes. I don't know this dude. You just see him on TV. You're just some character on the screen. But having an opportunity when I got that letter from the University of Miami, right? Because when you look at my transcript, when my name and all my information from football gets entered to this portal, they're like, holy crap, we can get a football player onto our campus without giving a football scholarship, right? So that didn't dawn on me till much later. But that process, they won purely based on popularity. Dude, I had stacks of offers, being all state, all conference, all the accolades, the Renaissance aspect, the transcript that I had. Every university in the US wanted to be at their school because it was going to make them look good. Reason why UM beat everybody else, because it's popular. I'm a Miami boy. I'm 305, orange degree, and I'm like, holy crap, I get to go to the same school. I get to play on the same field that Ray Lewis played on. I didn't even think about nothing else. And I didn't have the guidance. I didn't have a mentor because my mom couldn't have told me any different, right? At that age, at 17, 18, I applied. I did everything by myself. I didn't have anybody who cared enough about me and that I cared enough about to actually hear from them that said, hey, you may want to open some of these other envelopes and look at what these offers look like. I was stuck on stupid. I'm going to the U. That's it. But to say that I went on a full scholarship, but yet, and played football for 3 years, yet left the U with $60,000 worth of debt. And why? Just because they were more popular than everybody else, but because I didn't have the guidance or the counseling to understand that they were recruiting me into a program that they were experimenting on called music engineering at the time. Because I had the music and the math, they just threw me into this program. They didn't check my personality profile. It didn't matter. It wasn't about serving me. It was about serving them and their programs, right? So I get stuck in this program where literally, and if you go back in history and even look at news, and I don't know if they still have this stuff publicized, but people were committing suicide undergoing this program. Because imagine the quirkiness of a musician, right? The perfectionist that exists in a musician versus the desire to achieve as a mathematician, putting those two together, and then having them stuck with 21 credits a semester. For those of y'all who know how that works, it is almost an impossible feat. And mind you, some of these classes were 1 credit. So you're not talking about 6, 7 classes that happen to equate to 21. You're having to do 8, 9 classes a semester and having to do some. It was an impossible feat, right? To the point where they just continued that program a couple years later. Says something. So you experimented with my life. Then now while I'm at the U, they purposely sought me out at the wellness center. They sent players who I was seeing on TV to say, yo, why aren't you playing? You should walk on. Come talk to Pete Garcia. This was all a ploy. And I'm just blind leading the blind, stupid, like excited, like, man, these guys want to talk to me. This is so cool. And have no idea what the agenda is. And it's not serving me whatsoever. And I go out there, you end up that first year being the GPA booster, right? You're not really playing. You're like fifth string. Your number's 111, right? You don't know they're going to cut you at any time, right? And you know the way they used to cut people? You would just come into your locker from practice and everything was cleaned out. Brutal, right? And it wasn't because of the 30 walk-ons that happened to be on a team, and every year they would keep 5. So 25 kids get their hearts broken. And now, mind you, as men, we're tough. You know, I put a stip up her chin, you know what I mean? Stip up her lip, no big deal. Bro, these guys are broken, they're upset, right? They have nobody to turn to a lot of times. When it comes to now, their heart is being broken. I'm at the University of Miami. I think I have a chance. I come in and I get blindsided. There was this one day that I walked in, my locker was cleaned out, but to come to find out, they stuck all of it in number 49. So imagine how elated I am that day that I get moved up to a traveling position, right? With the chance of becoming a starter next year. I get a bag, and I got to share this. I get a bag of what they call the travel bag, a bag that I still have to this day. A travel bag that has all types of free stuff, warm-ups that I've never seen before as a walk-on, all types of sneakers and cool stuff. And I'm like, man, I'm going home. I done came up. Remember what my background is. No one gives me anything for free. I done came up, not even recognizing that I earned this because of blood, sweat, and tears that I put on that field. To then later on, a crazy part of that story is come to find out that one of the warm-ups they put in the bag was placed there incorrectly. It was not a player's warm-up. It was a coach's warm-up. But because we live in South Florida, I don't wear it very often until we were playing at the Gator Bowl up in Gainesville, and it's cold. It's a little chilly for us, cold. Sorry, guys, right? 40-something degrees, we're freezing, so we were wearing our warm-ups, and we're busting out the stuff we've never worn, and people were accusing me of stealing it. Now my character's is under question. Again, remember my background. That didn't bode true for me. This started a lot of controversy. It started a lot of issues, even to the point where I reached all the way up to the head coach at that time, right? And we had choice words. And I find myself walking off the football team devastated because I always was taught if you bust your ass and you work really hard, no matter what, you'll always win. And it's not necessarily true because it's not just what you know, it's also who you know.
It's interesting. It brings me back to the movie Major League with what's his name? I can't pull it out of my head right now. He was Ricky Vaughn in the movie.
Yeah.
Sheen, Charlie Sheen.
Oh, Charlie.
So Charlie Sheen, and the way that they cut him was they put a little piece of paper in the locker, and Snipes, Willie Mays Hayes in the movie, he would like sneak by it. And it was Roger Dorn that was fucking around with Ricky Vaughn. He didn't really get cut, but I'm thinking how traumatizing that is as a player when you go to your locker and everything is gone. It's such
you're thinking about that moment all the time too. Like, is this going to be the day?
Yep.
Right.
So you have this experience now, and I know it. You know, seeing that team now, you walk off the team, and then the following year, that team goes on and they win the championship. They win the national championship. So now there's this weight that's laying heavy on your shoulders that, oh my God, what did I do here? I can't believe this just happened. So you must have gone into like a really dark spot at that time in your life. Talk to us a little bit about that spot, and then how did you pull yourself out of that, AJ?
Dude, and it's such a profound question to ask at this junction right now, because if I had to describe it as anything, I went into a mild depression, right? And mind you, growing up in the Jamaican household I grew up in, you don't use those words. You don't use those terms. So no one would have defined it as that. No one would have given me any clinical advice. It was just, I didn't do anything. I didn't go to class. I got D, mind you, I was an A student. Now I'm getting D's and I's and letters I didn't even know you could get in school. I am at home eating. I am watching TV for 8-9 hours a day, sleeping for the other 10, 12, 14. I was for all intents and purposes, I was clinically depressed. And this lasted for almost a full year. It was about 10 and a half months of my life that I was just doing nothing. And I gained a whole bunch of weight, right? And Anthony, Dennis, under this layer of muscle now, I've got this layer of muscle, but now it's turning into fat. right? I'm getting a lot heavier. You know, I'm still eating like I play football, right? But I'm not working out nowhere near to that level. And dude, this is exactly what has driven everything I have done for my community, everything that we've done for every student and every child that we've ever come across, is because the one thing that pulled me out of that depression was mentoring. A third party, someone who didn't know me, right? Someone who I did not know, who took the time, sacrificed their time and resources to spend time with me and to pull me up out of this dark place. That's what changed my entire life and outlook to what we as human beings should be doing for one another.
Absolutely. And it's all about the mentoring and the taking that experience, working with mentors, understanding the importance of mentors. There's a lot of young men out there that don't understand the true importance of having someone who's gone through it, who's gone through the muck, who's gone through the shit and been able to pull themselves out and give them a piece of advice or several pieces of advice that will help them along on their journey. They paved the way for them in certain different aspects, and then, you know, turning the keys over and letting them drive at that point. So you're now pulling yourself out of this dark depression. Walk us through now, how did you get from there to where you currently are as the founder of the Epic Foundation? What you're doing right now, it's such important work. I just want to make sure that everybody in the audience really understands the work that the Epic Foundation is doing.
Absolutely. So the individual that I'm alluding to who really stepped into my life during that season, at 20, 21 years old, all the way up through probably my early 30s and even getting married. Dennis, this name will sound very familiar to you, Bishop Dwayne Swilly, the author of those books that I sent you, man.
Yes.
You know, The Dream Principle, Secrets of a Father, you know, some tremendous insight when it comes to his own life and the way he's shown up in a lot of people's lives, not religiously, not just from a religious standpoint at all, but really from the dynamic of mentoring and being able to spend that time and to invest time and resources in other people's lives that, once again, you're not a real father. This is not a birth or blood relative, right? So it means it digs so much deeper into our needs and desires as human beings to connect. So when he stepped into my life, and again, another, you know, profound speaker, you know, with all types of swag. And I was like, dude, like, man, I need what this guy has. And I emulated, right? A lot of what he did, I took and I made it my own, right? Just like in jazz music, I could hear some of the greats, Duke Ellington, I could hear what he did with a certain lick and say, man, if I can emulate that and then make it my own, now AJ got a sexy sound, right? And people are like, holy crap, that was just me listening to Duke, right? And then turning it into my own. So it's the same thing. I would emulate, I would take a lot of the teachings and a lot of the principles that he was raising his own children with, his own son, and the things that he was pouring into youth and pouring into me specifically. And what a part of the transition is remember, I now am at the University of Miami. I am no longer playing football. I have got all types of horrible grades I need now to make up for, right? And I got on my horse with his motivation, right? With that drive that I had that was triggered again, almost out of a place of anger initially, from that place of, I'm now going to prove them wrong, that I can be extremely successful even without football. I never needed football in the first place. I was going to be, for all measures of success to me, without having to be that only route is athletics. And so that picked myself up through that support. And I just started finishing my degree. Now, as an engineer, or getting an engineer degree, I had such a horrible experience in trying to now make up for the time lost, because you don't have, you know, at least back in those days, you don't have a lot of engineers playing football, right? So there was a lot of prejudgment even when I walked into a engineering class in my football warm-ups or football gear, and they're like, man, what the hell are you doing here? Right. We don't have engineers, we don't have football players in these engineering classes. Go over to poli-sci, go over to the business school, do something else. Like, that's not how this works. And once again, chip on my shoulder. You can't tell me that I can't do something. I'm gonna do it. Like, what you mean, right? So it would push me and it would drive me to prove people wrong. And so I took that same fuel, and as I got to a place of now graduating, right, top of my class, made it all the way back within the top 15% of my graduating class in 03, but having had to invest that last extra year and a half when all of my scholarships were, used up in 4 years, how you guys know that work, it ends after 4 years. Straight up to every college student that's listening to this, do not forget this. If no one's ever told you this, those scholarships end after 4 years. Don't think they're just going to stay there. I didn't know that. No one shared that with me. I just thought as long as I'm here doing class, it's going to get paid for because I busted my ass before and earned it. So I now had to, in order to finish my degree, I had to take out loans. And when I came out, I was like, I don't want to be an engineer. It was horrible. Those classes sucked. I don't like anything about this. Why was I in this in the first place? All those questions I had to find answers for those questions. And my mentor, Dwayne Swilly, at that point, he said, well, what are you going to do now? Like, what is the next step? You're now getting ready to graduate, right? What now? And he had me write out a list of things I could do because I had a lot of various talents and skills that were developed from home, from my childhood all the way up to this point. I'm like, I could be a musician. I can go out there and be one of those starving artists and go out to LA and try to jam out and figure out what band I'm playing in and, take my thing to the next level and hyper focus on it. I could be an engineer, hated that. I went into interviews throughout the US, Texas Instrument. I even went up to Canada, IBM. When I saw the people that were in those particular positions, I'm like, this don't fit my personality whatsoever, right? And we make a pretty penny, but I would be postal by the next year. You know what I mean? Sitting in those cubicles. So growing and understanding who I am at my core, I started to list, and he asked me a profound question. He said, what would give you the life that you always wanted? What would give you the lifestyle, the time, the magic, the resources you've always wanted? And as I was going through it, my skills in math, that entrepreneurship that I obtained from my mother when exposed, going into business for myself, allowing me to be a master of my own destiny, taking control of it, was the best thing on the list. And it was scary as hell because it didn't have a specific dollar amount at the end of it, but I decided to take a risk on myself. And growing up as frugal as I grew up and saving all the money I saved, I leaned on that money in my savings to start my first company called Donaldson Scholar Mentors, DSM. And that evolved many years later into a $500,000 organization generated annually, where I'm walking away with $150,000 every year for myself, right? Where most of my friends were still paying off their loans and only making 50. I was making 2 to 3 times more than them as an entrepreneur. And it was the best decision I ever made. But in doing that, even in doing that, I was only serving a specific community, people who could afford tutorial services at a $50, $60, $70 rate. As time passed on and a lot of people started to, the reputation started to grow beyond just the referrals that we're getting, and through the referrals we're getting, we started into communities that could not afford it, and it would break our hearts because they couldn't take on the services just because they couldn't afford it. And then it dawned on me, I didn't get into education and supplemental education and tutoring only to support kids from high income homes. I wanted to help children. I wanted to help the younger me's. So no matter what, Opalaka couldn't afford it, I needed to do something about it. So I took 10%, again, growing up with those principles, which I learned later on in reading, Think and Grow Rich and Poor Dad, Rich Dad, and all those things, that these are actual wealth principles that work, right? That the energy that it generates, that if I can give back 10% of every dollar that I earn, the things it does for society, if you want to call it karma, whatever the case may be, it really finds a very fulfilling place for me to see me thrive. So we always gave, my wife and I got married, we always gave back 10% of our income back to community. And that's what started the whole Epic Foundation movement, because we started just giving out scholarships left and right. Friends of ours would hear about what we're doing. They thought it was really cool. They started doing the same thing. We started putting all our monies together. And so we got incorporated, started the Epic Foundation of South Florida, and then the rest is history.
With the Epic Foundation right now, you're working with young men and women in high school, and you're providing scholarships for them, and they could use that scholarship for whatever they choose to. It's not, they don't have to use it for going to a 4-year school or going to a 2-year school or trade school. It can be used for anything at all. So working with that process, talk to us a little bit about the process for young men and women to apply for this scholarship.
Great question. Thank you. So first and foremost, our website, epicsouthflorida.org, spelled all the way out, EPIC, South spelled all the way, Florida spelled all the way out. And if I can just pivot here, even though cheap plugs, shout out to our social media, Epic South Florida on Instagram, Epic SFL on Facebook. But the reason why I bring that to notion is because I find that we are slowly but surely, not even slowly, it's been happening very rapidly. I find that the Epic Foundation is already starting to go outside of South Florida, right? We're having many conversations in New Jersey with organizations like Building Men and all of these other nonprofit organizations that exist out there. There are a lot of financial management organizations, just profound businesses that have a heart for the community and want to see the community bettered and are looking to invest in a nonprofit organization that can really organize all of their efforts. An overarching goal for the Epic Foundation is just that. We're not looking to reinvent the wheel. We've got 3 focus areas, right? And Dennis, as you mentioned, it's scholarships and financial aid, number 1. Why is that important? Well, I learned from my mentor that people don't care what you know until they know you care. So being able to show up for a child from a low-income home with a single mom and or dad who does not have the resources to get the things that they need, where educational equity is not actually delivered, for us to be able to show up on their behalf is profound. I'm not coming here to tell you what you need to be doing. I'm coming in here first and foremost to help you, to show up with you. A lot of these kids that come from traumatic backgrounds, when we just show up at the door, one of these big old checks for $1,500 as just an initial investment, their minds are blown, their hearts are touched. And at that point, we are allowed, we are permitted to then provide them any mentoring that they may need, which is our second focus area. So we start with scholarships. And let me give you a little bit more background. The neighborhood I grew up in, there was one strip that was family oriented and everything else around us was drug dealers and dope dealers. And the things that I witnessed at an early age of 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, just playing kickball in my neighborhood and seeing the dunks, hearing the gunshots, seeing the drug transactions and witnessing the things I witnessed. You know, one thing that I always noticed that resonated with me and kept all the way through the Epic Foundation? You know what the drug dealers and dope dealers do with those boys in the neighborhood when they don't have a father and they don't have the money to be able to provide something? They break them off a little money. And that's the kind of impact they make. Yo, kid, here's $100, go get you some J's. That impact works. A lot of those kids then emulate that same behavior because that's the only way they can see to be able to make the money that that guy has, that my mom doesn't have, that I don't see in my household. So even though that's a negative connotation, we can turn it for good and provide an investment in these kids' lives so that they can continue their path to success. Be it if it's a 4-year degree, be it if it's trade school, we have emergency funds. During the COVID pandemic, distance learning, we had to be buying and paying for laptops because a lot of these kids, especially down here in South Florida, got overlooked completely. I mean, there's statistical numbers out there that 20% of the student body in Dade County went missing because they couldn't log on.
Crazy.
So now scholarships evolve organically into mentorship. And dude, I'm so excited for this year because all these corporate sponsors have backed this. Dennis, you've had an opportunity to even meet some of them. Draft Pros Inc., Brian Law, all these organizations that have a heart for the community, they are now helping us to carve out career pathways. Scholarships, mentorship, and career pathways is the way the Epic Foundation sees a child go from student to success. And one day we'll be able to help kids go from cradle all the way to career.
It's tremendous, AJ. Brother, any final questions for AJ?
Dude, just what an impact all of this has. Like, it's amazing. Like, it really is. Everything that you've done, everything that you're doing currently. Out of all of your experiences that you've been through, which you've been through a lot and a lot of lessons have been learned, what's one thing that you could tell the Building Men audience that they can do starting today to kind of kickstart their life off, to get on the right path?
Man, dude, thank you for that. I mean, and I take this very serious because we know, first and foremost, the audience is listening. You guys have built a tremendous audience behind you, a tremendous following. We are one of them. We are big supporters of Building Men. It is an incredible platform. We know with all the various movements that are going on in the U.S., you know, the Me Too movement, you know, women's rights and liberation, the fact that you guys have created a platform for men to be built stronger and better, to have a voice is incredible. So big shout out to you guys. And the piece of advice I shared via the pillars of masculinity around failure, right? That's one thing. I learned it as an acronym. Free analysis to innovate and learn. So being able to not be afraid of failing is critical. But in addition, if I can kind of give a caveat or in addition to that, when some of the individuals, some of the guests that you guys had, I mean, such a profound moment, and thank you guys for sharing that with us, for taking the time to do that for the community. And so all you guys are out there, please tune in to the Pillars of Masculinity. So, you know, several of the individuals who came in really had everybody just stop and take a breath. And that was so huge because we're preparing for this, you know, this podcast, and people are thinking about what they're going to share, and just being able to stop and take 3 deep breaths was so profound for me. And I was mentioning this to you guys offline, how I found yoga, and it's been incredible for me as a former athlete, you know, dealing with all the injuries I've dealt with. But the breathing techniques that I've taken from that has resonated, has gone across the board for me being a father, for me being a husband, me being a businessman, me being able to deal with life day to day, me being a son, dealing with a mother who has cardiac heart failure right now. I have been able to navigate my life with much more peace because I can stop and I can breathe. And even in that time of breath, in my mind internally, I am just clearing my head or reciting different affirmations. Just different affirmations that I am talented, I am a great man, regardless of my mistakes. No matter my mistakes, I am still an incredible human being. I am thriving to be better every day. And always remember that it doesn't matter how many times you fail, it just matters how many times you get up.
It's tremendous. Free analysis to innovate and learn. I haven't heard that one yet. I absolutely love it. And I also wrote down AJ's got a sexy sound.
We
One
knew
of the
that.
big takeaways from the podcast. So you mentioned where we can get in touch with the Epic Foundation, all the different channels that we can find you, your website, your Instagram, your Facebook group, and we'll put all that in the show notes as well, along with a link to download the Pillars of Masculinity event. It's up on YouTube. AJ did a phenomenal job. He was one of the closers of the show. He was one of the last to go, and it's such an important message that you did. We truly appreciate you being along on this journey, your support of Building Men. And Epic Foundation is going to be something that is not just geographical in nature. It's definitely going to be something, I can see it happening already, that it's not just going to impact young men and women in South Florida. It will be across the country and then across the world. It's just, I believe wholeheartedly in you as an individual at the forefront of this movement. And those of you that are listening that has an ability to help out in a charitable sense, reach out to AJ Donaldson, reach out to the Epic Foundation, follow along with what they're doing, show them some love, because it really is, you are a transcendent, transformative human being, and I truly appreciate you.
Thank you, my brother. It means a lot. I appreciate it. I know I keep good company, man. So thank you to you guys. You know, stay tuned, stay close. I know we're going to do a lot of big things together. And just from last year already, what we were able to do in Bimini, Bahamas, man, people are still talking about it to this day. And the best is yet to come. They have no idea how much more we're getting ready to do together. So thank you, fellas, for this time.
Our pleasure. So find Building Men. It's building.men on Instagram. buildingmencoach@gmail is our email address. Our website is buildingmen.io. We have 2 sponsors: Become Stronger Industries, the creators of handmade badass steel maces, and Finish the Race Apparel, where you can find all things Building Men. We have our 4-day, 3-night men's retreat in Lake Tahoe, California, called the Hero's Journey, alongside Austin Linney and Chase Tollison. It is April 28th through May 1st. Check out that information below as well. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Go a step further than you thought you can go. We'll see you next time on Building Men.